I always thought I was the kind of guy who had life figured out. You know, the kind of guy who worked hard, loved his wife with everything he had, and thought that nothing could shake the foundation of his life. I had it all, the perfect job, a home I'd worked hard for, a family that I'd done everything to protect. And then, everything I believed in came crashing down. It all started on what was supposed to be our 10th anniversary. 10 years. I had it all planned out. A nice dinner, a night in a fancy hotel, maybe even a small gift to remind her of how far we'd come. I'd been working long hours for the past few weeks, and I had barely seen her. But I thought the anniversary would be our time to reconnect. I should have known something was off when she seemed distant the week leading up to it. She kept making excuses, acting like she had too much work, not showing the excitement I thought we'd share for our big day. Still, I ignored it. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just stressed. The evening began like any other. Well, almost. We had a nice dinner at a quiet restaurant, the kind we used to frequent when we first started dating. I couldn't help but notice that she wasn't really looking at me, wasn't as interested in our conversation. The spark, that undeniable chemistry we once had, was gone. But I pushed it aside. We were celebrating our 10th anniversary, after all. I tried to make it romantic, but she was distracted. Her eyes kept drifting to her phone, her fingers tapping away under the table. I laughed it off at first. Work, I told myself. She was just tied up with emails or messages. But even then, there was something about her behavior that felt off. By the time we arrived at the hotel, things had taken an even stranger turn. I'd made reservations for a special suite, the kind that overlooked the city skyline. We'd stayed here before on other anniversaries, so it wasn't unfamiliar territory. But as soon as we walked through the door, I noticed her attitude shift. She was quiet, almost too quiet. I thought maybe she was just tired, but then she excused herself to the bathroom, leaving me alone in the room. And in that moment, I felt it. The weight of something heavy hanging in the air. The strange discomfort. Something was wrong. When she came out, she wasn't the same. Her face was flushed, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I think I'm just really tired," she said, her voice low. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something was different, and I couldn't figure out what. The night ended quickly, with her retreating to the bed and pulling the covers over her, leaving me to lie awake, staring at the ceiling. I tried to sleep, but my mind raced. What had happened? Why didn't she seem happy? Why did she seem so distant? I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of the end. It wasn't just the exhaustion or the work stress. It was something else, a lie, a betrayal I couldn't yet see. But I would find out soon enough. And when I did, it would break me in ways I could never imagine. The next few days after our anniversary felt like walking through a fog. Mallory was still distant, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase. She was working late again, barely speaking to me when she was home, and when she did, it was surface-level stuff. Nothing deep. Nothing that made me feel like we were a team anymore. But I had learned over the years to be patient. So, I waited. I told myself everything would be fine. After all, she was just busy. But then, it happened. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I walked into the bathroom to find something that would change everything. There it was, an empty pregnancy test. Not just any test, but a positive one. My stomach dropped, the world around me spinning as I picked it up. My hands felt numb. There were 2 pink lines. It wasn't a mistake. I wasn't imagining it. I stood there, holding the test, trying to process what I was seeing. We hadn't been trying for a baby. Mallory had been avoiding intimacy for months, giving me excuses about work, late nights, stress, headaches, the usual. So why the hell was this here? And why hadn't she said anything? I stood frozen in the bathroom, trying to breathe, trying to think. I had to be sure, so I waited. I didn't confront her right away. That would have been too easy. Instead, I walked out, casually, trying to keep my heart from pounding out of my chest. I placed the test back where I found it, trying to make it look like I hadn't touched a thing. I needed time. I needed to figure this out without her spinning it into something else. When Mallory came downstairs later, she acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, offered a small smile, and asked about my day. The calmness in her voice, after what I just found, was infuriating. How could she look at me like that? Like everything was fine? I wanted to scream, to confront her right there, but I held back. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by losing my cool. We ate breakfast in silence, her eyes glued to her phone and mine fixed on her, watching for any hint of guilt, any sign that she knew I knew. But there was nothing. She was acting like everything was fine, like she hadn't just torn our world apart. That afternoon, while she was out, I didn't waste time. I started digging. I wasn't proud of it, but I knew I had to. The first thing I did was check the trash can. I found more. Receipts, ones I didn't recognize, things she had bought that had no place in our home. Lingerie, a cologne I didn't wear, and another pregnancy test. But this one wasn't hidden. It was thrown out, just like the first one, like it meant nothing. My heart raced, and the anger started to build. What was I supposed to do with this? She had to know I'd seen it all. It wasn't just one mistake. It wasn't some strange coincidence. This was intentional. But why hadn't she said anything? Why was she still pretending? When she came home that evening, I didn't say anything right away. I was going to play it cool, let her believe she was still in control. But it was hard. Every word she spoke felt like a lie. She had been lying to me for months. Years, maybe. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on. Who's the father? I asked, my voice calm but ice cold. She froze, her face paling. I didn't give her a chance to lie. Leary, who's the father? She opened her mouth to say something, but then she closed it. And that's when I knew. She was caught. I'd caught her, and she couldn't talk her way out of it anymore. She tried to play it off, of course. Said it wasn't what it looked like. She always did. Always had an excuse. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I found the tests. I found the receipts. So, tell me, who are you seeing? She didn't answer right away, but her eyes flickered. The hesitation was all I needed to know. I wasn't imagining things. There was someone else. And whatever she had been hiding, it was real. I had been a fool to ignore it for this long. The silence hung heavy in the air between us, thick with tension. I didn't need her to say anything more. Her face, her eyes, the way she shifted uncomfortably in her seat, told me everything. The denial, the manipulation, it was all part of the game she was playing. But I wasn't playing anymore. Leary, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. I need to know who he is. I deserve that much. She opened her mouth, as if to say something, anything, to shift the conversation away from the truth. But I wasn't having it. I've already pieced it all together. Don't even try. You've been lying for months. How long? How long has this been going on? My voice was low, but it felt like the words were tearing through my chest, demanding to be heard. Her eyes darted to the side, then back at me, and I could see it. The guilt. She knew she couldn't outrun this. She had thought I wouldn't catch on, thought I wouldn't notice the signs. But I did. I always did. It's not what you think, okay? You're overreacting. No. I cut her off, voice firm. Don't feed me that bullshit. I deserve better than this. You owe me the truth now. She hesitated, wringing her hands, as though searching for the right words to ease her way out of this. But she had no way out. There was no excuse that would fix this, no apology that could erase the betrayal. His name's Greg. He's a colleague. We've been seeing each other for a few months now. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, but I'm sorry, okay? Greg. That name burned in my mind, like acid, eating away at whatever little dignity I had left. Months? How many? I asked, voice quieter now, more dangerous. How many months of lies? How long have you been screwing him behind my back, Leary? She flinched, but still, the words came. It started before we went to the cabin for your birthday. That weekend, I had already been seeing him. I froze. The cabin. Our 10th anniversary. It was supposed to be our chance to reconnect, to rekindle the love we once shared. But she was already in the middle of her affair. It was all a lie. Every word, every smile, every plan she'd made for us. It was all a performance. I should have known, I muttered under my breath. You were already checked out by then. weren't you? You'd already moved on. Her eyes softened for a moment, like she was trying to show some semblance of regret. But I couldn't look at her like I used to. I couldn't see her as the woman I loved, the woman I trusted. She was a stranger now, and the anger burned in my chest like fire. I'm sorry, she said again. But this time, the words didn't mean anything. Not anymore. I stared at her, the woman who had promised me everything. The woman who had spent years by my side, pretending, loving me when it was convenient. The woman who betrayed me in the worst way possible. I should have known you were never really mine, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. Her face crumpled. Please, don't say that. You mean so much to me. No, I cut her off again. Not anymore. You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choice. You broke everything. I stood up, pacing the room. I couldn't stand still. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was suffocating, and I had to get away. I had to think, had to process this. Where are you going? She asked softly, standing up as well, her voice tinged with panic. I need to think, I said, my voice like ice. Don't follow me. Don't try to fix this. It's too late for that. She took a step forward, but I held up a hand to stop her. Go. I don't want to see you right now. And with that, I walked out of the room, away from her, from the life I thought I had, from the future I thought we shared that I couldn't be in that house anymore. It was suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me with every step I took. I needed to get out. I grabbed my keys, didn't even bother to change out of my work clothes, and just walked out the door. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face, but it didn't feel as harsh as the reality of what had just shattered in my life. As I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, I tried to wrap my mind around everything. Greg, her affair, the lies, the way she'd looked me in the eye for months, pretending everything was fine while she was out there with him. All the times she'd given me half-hearted kisses, all the times she'd made excuses not to be close. The signs were all there, but I'd been blind to them. Or maybe I just wanted to be. I wasn't sure anymore. I drove aimlessly, the streets blurring past me, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, yes, but worse, betrayal. I'd never imagined she could do this to me. Mallory had always been the one I trusted most in this world, the one I believed would never hurt me. Yet, here I was alone, driving through the night with nothing but pain in my chest. I needed answers. I needed closure. It wasn't until I found myself parked outside the bar Greg frequented that I realized how far I was willing to go for those answers. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I couldn't stop myself. I wanted to see this man with my own eyes, to confront him, to make him understand the depth of what he had taken from me. The bar was small and dimly lit, filled with the low hum of conversations and clinking glasses. I sat at the corner, out of sight, waiting. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I wasn't here to start a fight, not yet anyway. I just needed to see him. I needed to understand why. And then, there he was. Greg. He walked in with that self-assured swagger, a smile on his face as if the world belonged to him. It was sickening. He ordered a drink, and I watched him like a hawk. There was no sign of guilt in his posture, no hint of shame in the way he carried himself. I had to admit, it stung. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, carefree, and worst of all, he had what I wanted, the woman I loved. But I wasn't going to let him off easy. He had to face the consequences of his actions. He had to see the man whose life he had destroyed. I stood up and approached him slowly, my footsteps quiet against the floor. When he turned and saw me, his face froze. His smile faltered for just a second, but it was enough. It was all I needed to see. You, I said, my voice calm but dangerous. Greg, right? He seemed to gather himself quickly, putting on that smile again, the kind of smile that tried to hide everything beneath it. Can I help you? He asked, but his voice had a tremor to it now. I think you know exactly why I'm here, I replied, my gaze sharp. You've been seeing my wife, haven't you? For months? Greg's eyes darted around the bar, searching for an escape. But there was no escape. He couldn't run from this. He couldn't lie his way out of it. Look, man, I'm not looking for trouble, he said, but the fear in his eyes was clear now. He knew I wasn't just some guy looking to have a friendly chat. I wasn't that naive anymore. You're damn right you're not looking for trouble, I growled. Because the trouble you're in right now is about to get a whole lot worse. I took a step closer, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. You think you can just come into my life, take what's mine, and walk away with no consequences? You don't even know what it's like to lose everything. Greg opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. Don't, I warned. I'm not here for your excuses. I'm here for the truth, and you better start telling it. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, he slowly looked down at his drink, as if the weight of the situation finally hit him. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, Greg mumbled, but his voice lacked any real remorse. It just happened. Just happened? Is that your excuse? You think I'm going to buy that? I laughed bitterly. You knew exactly what you were doing. You saw my wife, you wanted her, and you took her. Simple as that. Greg's face reddened, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over him. He knew. I knew. I stood there for a long while, staring at him. There were so many things I wanted to say, so many things I wanted to do, but none of it mattered. In that moment, I realized the most important thing was that I wasn't going to let him get away with this. With a final glance, I turned and walked out of the bar, leaving Greg there, alone with his guilt. The next few days were a blur. The confrontation with Greg did nothing to ease the pain. If anything, it only made things worse. Seeing him, knowing how little he cared about the wreckage he'd caused, it stoked a fire in me I wasn't sure I could extinguish. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the years I'd spent blindly trusting, the years I'd wasted believing in something that was never real. I returned home that night after confronting Greg, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a building, empty of the warmth it once held. The smell of her perfume was still in the air, lingering like a cruel reminder. I walked through the rooms, each one feeling more foreign than the last, until I ended up in our bedroom. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at the bed we used to share. I couldn't remember the last time I felt close to her. I couldn't remember the last time we laughed together, talked like we used to. All of it felt so far away, like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. Mallory was still out, but I knew she would be back soon. And when she walked through that door, I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I'd been preparing for this moment since I first found the pregnancy test. What do you say to the woman who's been living a lie with you for months? What words can fix the unfixable? She came through the door late that night, just like I knew she would. But this time, I didn't try to act like everything was okay. I didn't try to play the role of the husband who just wants peace. I was done with pretending. She glanced up when she saw me sitting on the couch, her eyes widening for a brief second, but she quickly masked it with a soft, practiced smile. "You're still awake?" she asked, her tone light, almost casual. "Yeah, I've been waiting," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "Waiting for you to come home and tell me the truth." She froze, her expression faltering, then slowly closed the door behind her. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky now. "I told you." "Stop lying to me, Mallory," I interrupted. "I know about you and Greg. I know it's been going on for months. Hell, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. But I'm done pretending. So, why don't you just stop with the excuses?" Her face crumpled, but she didn't immediately speak. For a moment, it was like we were both stuck in time, neither of us sure what to say next. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you." But I wasn't hearing it anymore. Her apologies didn't mean anything to me. They were just words, hollow words with no real weight behind them. "You never meant to hurt me?" I scoffed, standing up and facing her. "Is that what you're going to say? You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought I wouldn't notice? All the late nights, the distance between us. Hell, you practically gave me the signs. You couldn't even look me in the eye, and still, I try to make excuses for you. But now I'm done. You've broken something that can't be fixed." She stood there, silent, the tears in her eyes finally slipping down her cheeks. She opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't going to let her. "You don't get to explain this away. You've already made your choice." "And it wasn't me," I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. You want him, don't you? You've already made up your mind. I watched her face turn pale. She took a step back, and I could see the regret in her eyes. But it wasn't enough. It didn't matter anymore. She had chosen him. She had torn our lives apart for him. She started, but I couldn't listen anymore. I needed her to leave. I needed to be alone, to think, to figure out what to do next. You need to go, I said, my voice steady. Take your stuff and leave. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending we have a marriage when all you've done is lie to me. Her face twisted in pain, but she didn't argue. She just nodded and turned to walk upstairs. I didn't follow her. I didn't say anything more. It was over. I heard the sound of her packing, the quiet rustling of clothes, the soft thud of a suitcase being zipped up. And then, the silence. When she walked back downstairs, she looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I didn't feel anything for her anymore. She was no longer the woman I loved. She was just someone who had betrayed me, and that was all she would ever be. I'm sorry, she whispered again, but it was too late. I'm so sorry. I said nothing. I just watched her leave, the door closing softly behind her. And just like that, it was over. The house felt empty. I didn't realize just how quiet it was until I was left alone. Mallory's things were gone, packed away, and taken with her. The silence settled in like a weight I couldn't shake. I had expected some sort of relief, some sense of clarity when she finally walked out. But there was nothing, just a gnawing emptiness that ate at me. I sat down on the couch, the same couch I'd sat on for years with her beside me, our legs tangled together, laughing at some stupid show on TV. It all felt like another lifetime now. I couldn't believe how quickly it had unraveled. 10 years. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building a life, and it all came crashing down in an instant. I ran my hand through my hair and stared out the window, the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. Where did I go from here? How did you rebuild after everything you knew was destroyed? It wasn't just the affair that broke me. It was the lies. The way she'd smiled at me every day while hiding the truth. The way I'd given everything for this marriage, only to realize I was the last to know about her betrayal. I didn't feel anger anymore, not like I did in the beginning. Now, it was just a quiet sadness. How could she have done this? How could she have looked at me, day in and day out, knowing what she was doing? I grabbed my phone and opened the Notes app. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything except think. So, I started writing out everything that had led to this moment, the love I had once felt, the trust that had been so easily shattered, and the man I was becoming in the wake of it all. By the time the sun started to rise, I had filled pages with my thoughts. It wasn't much, but it helped. It was the only way I could feel like I had some control over the chaos inside me. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the numbness faded. I couldn't avoid the pain anymore, but at least I wasn't drowning in it. The emptiness had become something I could live with. It had to be that way. I had no choice. I didn't know what it was that clicked, but eventually, I realized that I was going to be okay. The anger that had built up inside me still simmered, but it wasn't all-consuming. It didn't rule my every thought. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I focused on me. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in years. I spent more time with friends, reconnected with family, and began picking up the pieces of my life. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. I even started taking trips, weekend getaways to places I'd always wanted to visit but had put off for the sake of family. I went hiking, fishing, and even spent a week at a cabin in the mountains, alone with nothing but my thoughts and the sound of nature around me. I wasn't healed, not by a long shot, but I was getting stronger. I was learning how to be myself again, without the weight of someone else's betrayal hanging over me. Months had passed, and I was starting to feel like a new version of myself, stronger, more independent, and much more aware of what I wanted in life. Then one evening, just when I thought I was moving on for good, I ran into Mallory. It was at a coffee shop, of all places. I hadn't been expecting to see her, hadn't even thought about it. But there she was, sitting alone by the window, a cup of coffee in front of her. I froze, my heart catching in my throat. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, and her face had lost some of its old warmth, replaced by an expression that was unreadable. When she saw me, her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. I took a breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "Mallory," I said quietly, as if saying her name was still a habit I hadn't quite broken. "David," she replied, her voice tight but not unkind. We stood there for a moment, neither of us sure what to do. It felt strange, this encounter, this silence between us. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, breaking the stillness. "Neither did I replied. "But here we are." I sat down across from her. The awkwardness hung thick between us, but I didn't want to walk away. Not anymore. I'd spent too much time running from her, from the past. It was time to face it. She shifted in her seat, her hands fidgeting with her cup. "How have you been?" she asked, her voice soft. I wanted to lie, to say I was fine, but I couldn't. "I've been better," I said honestly, "but I'm getting there." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the table. "I'm glad to hear that. I really am." There was a long pause, and then she looked up at me. "I'm sorry, David, for everything, for hurting you the way I did." I took a deep breath. I'd heard the apology before, but this time, it felt different, real, and I realized, finally, that it didn't matter. The past was the past, and nothing could change it. "I don't hate you, Mallory," I said, surprising myself. I can't keep holding on to the person I thought you were. I need to let go." She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I understand. I've been carrying this guilt with me for months, but I don't expect forgiveness." "You don't need my forgiveness," I replied. "I've learned to forgive myself. That's enough." She smiled faintly, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to tear myself apart for what had happened. I had let go. Over the next few months, I continued to rebuild my life. I focused on myself, on my career, on my passions. I traveled more, met new people, and allowed myself to feel the freedom I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It wasn't all easy, but I had become someone new, someone stronger, someone who could look at his past without regret. I met someone new, too. Her name was Emily, and she was everything I needed in that moment. She didn't try to replace Mallory, but she offered something that I had longed for: understanding, kindness, and a chance at a fresh start. We took things slow, letting the relationship develop naturally, without rushing into anything. I wasn't looking for someone to fix me. I just wanted to enjoy life again. As time passed, I started to realize something important. I was no longer the broken man I had been when I first found out about the affair. I had grown. I had healed. And most importantly, I had learned to trust again. First in myself, then in others. That it's been years now since Mallory and I went our separate ways, and I can honestly say that I've never been happier. I've found peace with the past, and I've created a future that's mine. The betrayal that once threatened to tear me apart is now just a chapter in my story, one that taught me more about myself than I ever expected. I've learned that the things that hurt us don't always break us. Sometimes, they shape us into something stronger. I still have scars, but I wear them proudly. They are reminders that I've survived, that I've overcome. Life goes on, and with each passing day, I get stronger. The man I am today is not the same man who was once betrayed. He's someone who knows what he deserves, someone who understands the power of letting go. And as for Mallory, I wish her well. I'm at peace with what happened, and that's all I can ask for. The road to healing wasn't easy, but I've made it. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where the future takes me.